First of all, I consider Warren Buffett to be a very funny man. Index funds definitely sahi nahi hai.
The index is closely following the economic growth of a country.
It is also tracking the economic fall of a country, right? So it is the unutilized money of a person who has worked hard for so many years.
Yeah.
It is lying around with these pension funds.
Some influencer has said that index funds is a big brother of large cap mutual funds.
I don't know where these relationships come from. At least mutual funds have a father.
Welcome to episode number 2 of Money Biceps, wherein today we are going to take a deep dive into the world of index funds. And to facilitate this dive, we have our diving instructor, Mr. Chenthil Iyer.
Thank you.
Chenthil is also a SEBI registered investment advisor and founder and chief strategist at Horus Financials. So Chenthil, boring is beautiful. This is how the finfluencers, the YouTubers have been promoting or describing the index funds. Do you think the index funds are boring or beautiful, or maybe both as they call it?
Index funds are boring because there is nothing that you have to do with it.
Yeah.
So there is an index which gets prepared and you have to just follow that index.
Okay.
It has its own participants, it has its own weightages. Nobody decides those weightages. It is decided purely on the basis of market capitalization.
Yeah.
Okay, which is nothing but the product of the number of outstanding shares with the last traded price. Okay, that's how market capitalization is calculated.
Yes.
Based on that, you just arrange the top 30 stock, top 50 stock, top 200 stocks in that particular order and also in the same weightage. You get an index fund or you get an index.
Yeah.
And you start mirroring the same index with your money. It becomes an index fund. So there is nothing intelligent about an index fund. You said boring is beautiful. I do not agree with that. Because if boring was beautiful, then we would have a lot more turnout in the theatres for those art films. I would like to add a caveat here. Not being active at all is also not a good idea as far as investing is concerned.
Yeah.
And too much of activity is also not a good idea.
Yeah.
So we need to somewhere figure out that middle path when it comes to long-term investing.
So Chenthil, you had also said in the trailer that index funds are actually bubbles which may burst any time. Can you please elaborate in a very simple language for our audience why index funds are bubbles?
What do you consider a bubble? Some kind of inflation in prices? So if you look at stocks as a commodity, the price is increasing. So it can be because its value is increasing,
Yeah.
or it can be just because the price is increasing without any reason, which is called inflation.
Yeah.
So when the prices are inflated and not growing according to the intrinsic value of the stock, then it constitutes a bubble.
Yeah. So in that sense, how is index a bubble?
I told you in the beginning, following an index doesn't require too much of intelligence.
Yeah.
Because of which, a lot of people take it as an easy shortcut to investing in the stock market,
Yes.
which creates a lot of demand for those specific stocks which are there in the index.
And
So
that,
there is a huge gap in the demand and supply. It's like too much money chasing too few stocks.
yeah.
The same classic economics at work over here.
Yeah.
And that is the cause of inflation.
That is the cause for any bubble.
Yeah, inflation. No?
Yeah.
So inflation in prices of commodities that get used, consumer goods or whatever, the same economics applies to stocks as a commodity as well.
Okay.
So most of the indices worldwide are inflated. All because it is considered or touted to be safe.
Fine. Let me recall one of the video that I saw on the YouTube that this particular YouTuber said that there is a 90% guarantee of getting returns if you invest in index funds. So what is your take?
That's rubbish.
Okay.
Who gives the guarantee?
Because index is closely following the economic growth of a country and Indian economy is growing.
It is also tracking the economic fall of a country, right?
That's also true.
It is a measure. Index is just a measure of market movement.
Okay.
Nothing more than that. It is not a qualified portfolio. It is an arbitrary portfolio. And somehow, since more eyeballs fall on indices, most people think they are safe. So it is a classic case of herd mentality at work here, wherein people start following something which has got more visibility, and since they have more visibility, the components of the indices also have more visibility.
Yeah.
And soon what happens is just like the recruiters start targeting the top 10 people from a college.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the same way investors start chasing those so-called top stocks whose only qualification is higher market capitalization.
Okay. Let me checkmate you, Chenthil, at this point. Warren Buffett, the world famous investor, philanthropist, we all know him. He has advised his family, after I die, you obviously don't know how to pick up stocks like me. In that case, what you do is invest the money I leave behind in passive index funds. Can the same be said for retail investors in India who also don't know how to pick stocks?
First of all, I consider Warren Buffett to be a very funny man.
Okay.
And my best guess is that if this person has said this statement, it must be in good jest.
Okay.
And also he must be most likely taking a dig on his family members. That you have the veteran who has spent his entire lifetime picking stocks and studying balance sheets, and his own family doesn't know how to do it.
Fine. So, if given a choice, and having criticized index funds a lot, and to some extent mutual funds as well in our last episode.
I didn't criticize mutual funds. I criticized the SIP mode of investment.
Okay. Though mutual funds also have some pros and cons.
They do. Every investment has its own pros and cons.
Okay. So, I am going to fire some questions at you, and you have to choose one.
Okay.
Given a choice, where will you put your money? Index funds or mutual funds?
Yeah, actively managed mutual funds.
Okay. Actively managed mutual funds or direct stocks?
Direct stocks.
The third question, will I be in direct stocks or derivatives? I will come to it possibly in the next episode of our podcast. But direct stocks reminds me of our discussion that we had a few days back, wherein you had said that stocks should be picked based on their intrinsic value.
Yes.
Now, index funds or even index is a collection of those stocks who may have their intrinsic values. So do you think index funds has anything to do with the intrinsic value of these stocks?
See, I am no one to comment whether some stock which is part of the index has intrinsic value or not. The main point that we need to all understand is that if that intrinsic value, or rather the market value or the price that it is commanding in the market is commensurate with its intrinsic value. So if too much of money is chasing that particular stock, naturally the market value will be way more than the intrinsic value of the stock. So
Right.
how do you consider that those stocks as valuable?
Just because they are in index.
Just because they are in index and people have the faith that since they are the top stocks in the market, based on just one criteria, which is market capitalization,
Yeah.
they are the best. So which is debatable.
So it is faith that is working, and investing should never be done in good faith. Investing should be done as per the fundamentals of a particular company.
People don't want to use intelligence. They want to take a shortcut. Everywhere we can see that. People want to take shortcuts. And index fund or index investing is one shortcut.
Okay. Let us move from direct stocks to the comparison between index funds and mutual funds. So, one more time, some influencer has said that index funds is a big brother of mutual funds, large cap mutual funds. Your take on this?
I don't know where these relationships come from.
Okay.
At least mutual funds have a father.
The fund manager?
Yes.
Well, index funds do also have a person who tracks.
Yeah, a person who tracks a fund cannot be called as the father of the fund, right? So how can the index fund become brother of anyone?
So, Chenthil, a reason why a lot of retail investors are going towards index funds is that they consider index funds as less risky than any other equity investment.
It is a myth for sure. Because we have been discussing so far why price of the stocks in the market indices are not commensurate with their intrinsic value. So which means you are always paying a much higher price than the true value you are getting.
Yeah.
So that price to value gap itself creates a risk. Now, in addition to that, how do we measure whether the markets are falling or rising?
By the value of the index.
So the index is the one which falls, right?
Yes.
When the market falls, what do you mean by market falling? The index is falling.
Yes.
What do you mean by market rising? The index is rising. So the indices are as volatile as any market instrument would be. So how do you say that this is less risky or more risky than that?
Okay, so I'm sure our audience are pretty much clear. If you are investing in index funds only because you consider them to be less risky, it is not true. One more thing that comes with risk is return. It is considered that risk and return go hand in hand even though they are not directly proportional. So they'll still go hand in hand.
It should. Ideally, it should. If it doesn't, it is no longer an index fund.
I have some very interesting statistics with this concept of return that we are now talking about. The BSE Sensex in June 2020 was at 34,000. The same Sensex today as we talk, June 2025, is at 82,000. Now this has more than doubled in last 5 years, almost 2.5 times. So the 100 rupees that you had put in an index fund in 2020 June have now rose to 250 rupees. And that transforms to a CAGR of almost 20%. So 20% CAGR isn't bad for a retail investor?
I never said 20% is bad or 20% is good.
Mm-hmm.
25% is better than 20%. 15% is worse than 20%.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the time that you have invested the money in. For instance, if you are able to actually enter during the COVID crash that we had, then naturally the way it rose back to its previous levels, that itself creates a lot of return in a very short span of time. So the recovery of market post the COVID crisis, that is what has resulted in this 20% CAGR.
Okay.
And in any case, variable markets, whatever return it gives in the past, it is just a return in the past. It is still not something that you can actually be very sure of. Because if tomorrow the market crashes by 70 or 80%, what happens to those returns which you have recorded for the last 5 years?
They are gone, wiped out.
Wiped out, right? So, so long as you remain invested, the risk always is there of a negative return or a suboptimal return.
Yeah.
If you have taken out that money and used it for some purpose, yes, you have actually encashed those gains.
Okay. Chenthil, as we conclude this discussion on index funds, so can we say based on our discussion that index funds sahi nahi hai?
Yes, index funds definitely sahi nahi hai. I'll tell you one more reason. There are large fund houses who are managing retirement funds.
Yeah.
One of the heaviest customers of index funds are these retirement funds worldwide. So it is the unutilized money of a person who has worked hard for so many years, which is lying around with these pension funds, and they happen to be the biggest consumers of index funds. So there is a continuous inflow of money into index funds, and because they feel it is a shortcut and they feel they are actually trying to keep the money of their investors safe, or rather at least want to give that perception to the investors that they are trying to keep their money safe by investing in indices, a large portion.
Otherwise, you don't find any merit in index funds for retail investors.
So long as there is fund flow into index funds, this will keep on growing over a period of time, and whenever it bursts, it will burst for everybody.
Okay.
So at least these funds have an excuse to give to those investors that, see, we did the best for you by not using their intelligence. Come straight to the point, index funds sahi hai kya? In my opinion, index funds sahi nahi hai.
Okay.
They are just bubbles, and fundamentally it doesn't give any value to the investor. You are actually paying inflated cost. You can always find much better stock if you create an equity portfolio. I would like to say a parting note.
Yeah.
See, while I say that index funds sahi nahi hai, if you have already invested in index funds and you have succeeded in it, in terms of the 20% CAGR that you were talking about, give a pat on your back for a great job done. But as Warren Buffett would have wanted his children and his family members to do, please do learn about fundamental investing. Please do learn to read balance sheets of companies and accordingly pick a more valuable stock than those available in the index.
And if you are not able to do it, there are always experts like Chenthil who can always assist you in this difficult job.
Possibly, yes. There is no harm in taking help. If you are sick, you go to the doctor. So
Right.
So if you want help in investing, you should go to the right person.
Yeah. Do what you can do the best and always outsource the rest.
Yeah.
So thank you,
Thank you so
Chenthil,
much. Thank
for
you
this
for the
wonderful
opportunity.
discussion and a great insight on index funds, which is not really talked a lot on. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.